Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the best Dawg Gone Podcast in the land. We are a part of the Fanatical Elves Network, a subsidiary of the Fans First Sports. I am Ethan Greenberg, and alongside of me is my co-host Heather. And joining us tonight is our guest Lance Riesland, or Coach Riz. He is a contributor to Cleveland.com. If you're a Cleveland Browns fan, if you're a football fan, you see his stuff. He's all over there, and he's got the analysis, and he is joining us here tonight to give us some insights. We've got lots of questions for him. Heather, how are we doing this evening?
We're great. We are in the middle of it's like heart of good season coming up. We're getting into spring. You got college, basketball in full swing. You got the NBA. It's great. It's a great time to be alive.
It is. It is. Hey, Lance, thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing very well. I appreciate you guys having me on. I'm looking forward to it.
Well, we are all of the thanks goes onto that side of the table. I feel like I'm in Office Space. The pleasure of all on this side. No,
have you seen my stapler? Please don't go burning anything down right now.
Exactly. So, folks, everybody, thank you for tuning in here. Lance Riesland, he's a special contributor to Cleveland.com. He's a former head football coach at Garfield Heights from 2014 to 18. And you spent 18, if I read this right, you were 18 seasons as an assistant for your father, Chuck.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Wow. And in 2018, Garfield Heights went 11-1, appeared in the OHSAA Division II regional semifinals. You went 10-0 in regular season. It marked the first Garfield Heights team in 41 years to have an undefeated regular season, and you beat Warren G. Harding for the first playoff victory in school history. Heck of an accomplishment, man.
Well, I'll tell you what, it goes to show you, I was part of a whole, right? So I had really good assistant coaches who did a lot of the work that no one sees, and we had really good players. And whether it's high school, college, or a pro, you win with players, and you don't win with coaches. We tried to be organized. We tried to do the best we could, but the bottom line is you win with really good players. We had a great senior class that year. My assistants were fantastic. We really enjoyed that entire year. It was a great way to finish for me, just because I wanted to be, with my daughter more, because I wasn't home very much. As coaches know out there, it's just a lot. I enjoyed every part of it. It's just a long season. Becomes 12. It's become 12 months a year with the weight room and everything involved. So just wanted to be a full-time dad and kind of do what I, practice what I preach with my kids when I was coaching is, families first. And I've enjoyed all this time with my daughter, being able to see her grow up. So, and I get to do things like this, which kind of scratches that football itch for me.
I understand completely. I do this. I do the broadcasting, the podcasting is a bit of a quote unquote itch, as I've had to take on the real life responsibilities of paying bills and having a spouse and having kids and so on and so forth. So I get it. So you're still a teacher though, correct?
Yeah. It's my 29th year of teaching. It's amazing. I've been, when you look at it, it's funny when you start to see retirement down the road here. But yeah, I've been teaching for a long time at Garfield Heights. I've really enjoyed it. And, like I said, I miss coaching, but I get to do a lot of these things now. And it's funny, I get to do the things I like when it comes to being coaching. I love X's and O's. I love relationships. And I've got to, this is new for me over the last couple of years. So this has been a lot of fun trying to teach the game of football and learn myself, to be honest with you.
Yeah, definitely. I got to tell you, like I said in the opening, I've read your stuff. And your posts and your stories, articles on Cleveland.com, and the insight is all there. It's great because as much as I've watched football and play video games, I don't know what I'm doing, really, honestly. I don't understand the full strategy. So it's great to talk to somebody who can help explain these things to me and make a little sense of it.
Well, my wife, she makes sure all my stuff that I enter, I'm really good at the football stuff, maybe not so great at the writing stuff. So my wife works at, helps me editing my stuff. And we always talk about, my dad taught me this a long time ago. No one really cares what I know, and it's what your players know. And I've kind of taken that into the realm of this new kind of thing that I'm doing, where listeners and people, they don't really care what I know. They want to learn stuff. So that's kind of how I've always done it, where big phrases, big football terms, those things are great, and I understand those things, but that's not helping everybody learn the game. And that's kind of always what I wanted to do, is try to teach it to the masses. So my wife keeps me in check if I'm too football-y, she likes to call it. So I try to appeal to everyone, where the people who know the game, it doesn't bore them, and people who don't know the game can get a handle on it.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I start hearing things and I'm like, what? It goes over my head. And heck, I think my son knows more about the game. He's 14, just from playing Madden. He's and heck of a learning experience there for him. But it's all good. It is all good.
Yeah, like I said, those games are crazy. I have enjoyed this because it's talking. It's trying to. Not seem pompous. It's trying to, I'm on the same boat. And the thing about me is I've learned things about podcasting, and I've learned things about football. Obviously as an educator, both my parents were educators. My wife's an educator. I've always been a lifelong learner. So I learn just as much as everybody else. And I just try to give knowledge that I know, which is there's a list of things I know and don't know. Unfortunately, the list of things I don't know is a lot longer than the list of football things I do know.
Right. And now Heather also joins the comment. She is, she was also a Golden Flash for some time there. So we got the Kent State thing going on here.
Yes, we do. Yeah, see, there's a theme, and we do like learning, and we're really excited to have you on, because maybe we can learn something, and our listeners, because the draft, right? Like we want to. The draft is coming up, and the Browns are such a dumpster fire. So who do we take? Who do we not take? Who does Tennessee take? What we're just going to get into all of the X's and O's and hear what your expert opinion is. So, okay, so from my opinion, this draft class, every draft class I think has their strengths and their weaknesses, but this draft class is a bit of an anomaly for me. There's a lot of high ceilings, I think, and there's a lot of drop-offs. So who are your top prospects? I know that, we talk a lot about the quarterbacks. Where is Shador going? And so what do you think? Is it the quarterback class? Is it the all other class? Who are you liking for your top prospects?
Well, the first thing is with quarterbacks, even, people who know what they're talking about, people who are much smarter than me, including, in my opinion as well, the quarterbacks are so hard to judge because there's the it factor. And whatever that it factor is, it also comes with, regardless of how important the position is, a quarterback, you have a lot of things around you that need to be right. And with offensive line scheme, you look at a guy like Bo Nix. I wasn't as high on Bo Nix as a lot of people last year. He was outstanding because he got in the right scheme with the right guy. So the quarterback position, I do think there are some really good quarterbacks, and I think there's three in particular that are going to be really good pros. My top, the tight end position is loaded. The running back position is absolutely loaded. The defensive line position is absolutely loaded. My top guys in the draft, if I was to take a non-quarterback, it'd be Hunter from Colorado, just because I think he's a generational talent on both sides of the ball. I think he'll be a DB at the next level. And then Abdul Carter, who is a freakishly athletic kid out of Penn State, a little bit undersized, but the way he plays, there's certain guys who don't have to do things right, and they're just special. And he's one of those guys who kind of goes away from how you play a reach block or how you play a down block. He just plays football. And so those are my two top guys. But, quarterback position is so vital. And here in Cleveland, it's been such a disaster over the last couple of years. But I don't fault the Browns for trying. And I say this with everybody I talk to new. When the Browns signed Deshaun Watson, I really liked the signing. I thought they were trying to improve themselves. It just didn't work. And now they got to figure out how to get out of it. But at the time, I thought it was a good move because he was, I broke down every throw from 2020 and he was elite, and he just hasn't worked out here. So, but yeah, I would say, but once again, there's a couple really good tackles. The kid from, I'm never wrong going offense or defensive line with me. The kid out of Texas is really good. Banks. The Campbell kid out of LSU is outstanding. The tackle out of West Virginia is outstanding. There's a couple linebackers I really like. Malachi Starks, the safety, is outstanding. Like I said, I think Hunter is a generational talent. I think he'll be a lockdown corner from day one. I think.
Okay, I was going to ask you, where do you have Travis Hunter?
Well, it's funny. The learning curve in the NFL for receiver is obviously is huge, but I think you can have a package for him on offense. He's proven that he can, at the highest level, he can play. So I think he's going to be a corner, because corners are really hard. Covering man in the NFL is really hard. So I think he'll be a corner, and I think there'll be packages for him on offense. I really do, because he's that talented. I also think that playing corner, you can be a little bit more athletic. And I learned a long time ago, when your brain's thinking, your feet aren't moving. So you have to be able to play your feet have to be moving. I get lucky enough to go down and watch every practice of the Browns and be down there in the field. These are big, fast guys, and you got to, and that cornerback position is really hard to play. So when you can find a guy like Travis Hunter, as good as he is on offense, I think you got to put him at corner, and I think people will put him at corner and find a spot for him on offense and find touches for him.
Or maybe, maybe it's a special teams thing, because he does have decent hands. But they do have him listed as a DB. So I think that's the intention. But I was just curious. I was wondering what you thought about where he was going to play, because he is a generational freakish talent.
Well, I think you said it best. So, on my call sheet, all the coordinators' call sheet, head coaches' call sheet, it just says touches. So there's some guys who are positionless, and I think that's what the Browns need. They need a playmaker, but to me, Travis Hunter is positionless. You got to find touches, and you're right. It could be kickoff return, punt return, reverses, jet screens, RPOs. There's a lot of things you can do where he doesn't have to be involved in understanding what he's seeing. As a receiver, you got to understand the coverage you're seeing. Are you the hot route? There's a lot of things that go into that. I think they can't overload him with that, but they can find touches for him. And I'll say this all the time: you don't win with coaches, you win with players. It's players over plays. It'll always be that way. So if he's really good, so they got to find ways to have him impact the game regardless of where he's at.
Right. Now, you don't win, win with coaches. Is that kind of like The Simpsons, when you don't win friends with salads?
That's correct. Exactly. It's exactly right.
Yeah, I mean that's a common thing that goes on around my house. But you don't win friends with salads. You don't win.
Now we're gonna start singing Simpsons. We take some hard left turns here, so.
All right. Oh, good. Yeah, absolutely.
You're going to set your own risk.
Exactly. And that is part of the fun here. So, a lot of the things you talked about. Now, Heather, I'm going to veer off and take a little bit of a left turn, because we talked about this before when about playing defensive back and the transition from college to the pros. You did it at the high school level. You watched guys. How much different is it, or what is how does the philosophy change from college to the pros? Because we get tore up on this podcast talking about defensive pass interferences, especially against Davis and Igmanosin, and how in college they're face guarding, yet they have to. You need to be turned around to the ball. Why aren't you doing it in college?
Yeah, over the last 10, 15 years, the bottom line is people want to see points, and they've made it really, really tough. That's why I think Hunter will be a corner, because they've made it really tough with hands and where things you can do, defensively. The thing about Hunter is that, especially if he's in the right system. So if he's in Jim Schwartz's system, he's going to be in man a lot. And when you're in man, that's what you work on. And everybody says, why are the Browns good at it? Because that's what they work on. When you are what it's not what you repeatedly say, it's what you repeatedly do. And the Browns practice man. And when you practice man, you get better at it. And that's part of the problem with DBs, is they have to work both zone and man. And most of the times when they get those interferences, because they're in man coverage, and it's just really hard to cover those NFL guys without cheating a little bit.
He clearly has the same pain that we all do. The Alabama DBs never learned to turn around for the ball. Neither did our corners last year.
Well, you got to turn around. I mean, you said it right. You got to turn your head, and that's the one thing that'll get you out. That's one thing that'll get you out of trouble. You get away with a lot, and we always taught our guys, when their head goes, your head goes, and you can get away with a lot if your head's not to the receiver. You can get away with a lot, and it's just really hard. I've been involved in football for 40 years. And when you're like, I was just so shocked when you're down there, the size and speed of these guys. Even I played college football, and I consider myself a fairly good athlete back in the day. But when you see these guys, they're just so immense and fast. It's hard to imagine even these receivers. You look at like Ced Tillman, some of these guys, they're just such big guys. It's hard not to be physical with them and expect not to get, to have a chance. You're going to have to be physical with them. So it's very, very tough on the DBs.
Right.
We're getting into a whole other topic here.
Oh,
But
yeah. My
he
bad.
can't play defense. Yeah, we'll talk about that another bit. You're a little wrong. I do disagree with you a little bit.
That's okay. It's all right. I like it.
Not you, the comment. The
Okay.
comment.
Okay. I was gonna say me. Listen. Won't be the first time.
No. I wouldn't be that. I would be like, I would be a little bit more.
All right. So going into the draft, all right, I'm going to go back a little bit to the script here, as it were. What do you think about the various philosophies of the best player available versus drafting for need? You talked about guys like Abdul Carter. He plays football. So that would kind of, to me, say that's more of a, hey, is he a best player available versus a play for need, et cetera, et cetera. Is there any one way that works better than the other when it comes to drafting and looking at prospects?
Well, I think especially in the first round, especially in the first 10 picks, I don't think you can draft for need. And a lot of people feel that you do, and I don't think they're necessarily wrong either. The only bad plan is no plan. So for me, I think in that first 10 to 15 picks, you have to take the best players. Those first 10 to 15 picks, those are guys that can change the Jaden Daniels, right? They can change the trajectory of a system, and whether it be offense or defensively. Now, as you get into later rounds, and there's guys who are high on my board. There, those guys who do it for a living at the NFL level. There's guys in the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th round that they really like at a certain position. Then you start filling needs. But I really think early on, you can't pass on. If I'm the Titans, I don't know how they pass on Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter. Now, obviously, they need a quarterback. Maybe they go Cam Ward. But there's a high ceiling there, and there's also a low floor there. So, it's hard to pass on these guys who are that good, right? Sometimes those boring picks, Joe Thomas, the Campbell kid out of LSU, those guys are going to be great pros. The quarterback position's tough, but for me, if the answer to that question, I would say early on, you got to take the best player. And then as you get into the draft, that's why you have all those scouts and all those guys who do a great job. Then you start filling out your roster and what you need.
Right. Yeah, and Newt DBIQ is super underrated. That's Newt, I owe you a message. I do owe you a message.
Well, yeah, you know what? You're reading that, I couldn't agree more, because you have to know what the offense is doing, and that's part of the reason Travis Hunter is really good, because he's an offensive player. So, there's only so many things you can do in football. If there's a guy high, there's a guy low. If there's a guy in, there's a guy out, and they do it 1,000 different ways. But if you can understand route concepts and understand, how teams are trying to attack route concepts. So if you show cover 2, and you can show the quarterback it's cover 2, but actually be in 4, it's really, really important that you understand what an offense is trying to do. And that's what Travis Hunter, he doesn't get enough credit for how smart of a young man he is.
And Newt asked, what if you need a quarterback and they're not a top 10 BPA? Then what would you do?
Well, if you look at the quarterback position, it's not very good. It's not very good in terms of like picking guys who are going to be, you're just as have just a good a chance of picking 3rd, 4th, 5th round as you do first round in terms of success rate, right? So you have to, I think if you're not taking the guy who's a generational talent, then you got to find a guy who fits your system. A guy like Curtis Rourke might not be a guy who's high in everybody's system, but a guy within structure, he's going to be pretty good, I think. So if he's in a Kevin Stefanski old offense, and I think they're going to go back to that a little bit, Curtis Rourke could have some success. He's a big guy.
That would hurt my soul as a Buckeye.
Well, yeah, it's and once again, there's another guy like Will Howard. There's a guy who, for me on tape, I've been asked a lot about Will Howard. Well, the playoff games were great for him, but he's a really hard evaluation because the talent around him, and he throws the ball behind line of scrimmage or vertically. And you don't see him really drive the ball in that 15 to 25 yard range. Now, it doesn't mean he can't. It doesn't mean he can't be elite at it. You just don't see a lot of that at Ohio State because they're so talented. Now he makes great decisions. So there's a great example of what you're talking about. There's a guy who could go 4th, 5th round, maybe higher, but be really, really good because he's in the right system with the right coaching, with the right players around him.
Right. All right. That way you certainly hit on my points there. Go for it, Heather.
Yeah. So you had answered one of the questions that I was going to ask earlier about your non-quarterback top prospects, but who do you think? Okay. So we touched a little bit. Quarterback, in my opinion, I've been saying this, and obviously, like we talk about, we're experts. We do podcasts. We know what we're saying.
Yes.
So we've been saying the quarterback draft class this year is just not as strong as other years. So what are you saying? Who are the top quarterbacks that can go?
It's funny you say that because, like you said, your guess is as good as mine when it comes to quarterback. So, don't sell yourself short because you watch a lot of tape. You guys do a lot of things. You're talking about this stuff all the time. So, with the quarterback position, for me, I have Shedeur Sanders. And the reason why I tell everybody is because I think anticipation and accuracy carry over very well to the NFL. And I've heard a lot about his arm strength. Well, if you anticipate and you understand what you're seeing, that makes up for arm strength because you know where you're going with the football. If you don't understand where you're going with football, you better be able to drive the football. And so he's very, very smart pre-snap. He understands where he's going with the ball. So I think his ceiling not as high maybe as Cam Ward's, but I also don't think the floor is as low as Cam Ward's. So Cam Ward could come in and be elite, but Cam Ward's also an improviser. And he kind of gives you that 2020 Deshaun Watson or that Mahomes kind of thing where it's he improvises when the play breaks down, where Shedeur Sanders is going to be more in structure. Well, if you're the Browns, the guys out of structure have not been very good. Deshaun Watson was not very good with what his talents were. It did not match what Kevin Stefanski likes to do. And then they went out and got guys who, and I appreciate that out of Kevin Stefanski, going out and getting Dorsey and trying to maximize the most out of his quarterback. I don't fault him for at all, and I think that was a great idea. It just didn't work out. So I really like Shedeur Sanders. Now, there's some other guys that I'm high on that people aren't as high on, right? I really, really like Jackson Dart, but he's very hot and cold. He's as good as play action as there is. His footwork's not real good in the pocket if he consistently has to throw from the pocket. Okay. A guy I really like, Dylan Gabriel. Now, he's only 5'10", but he gives me Drew Brees vibes. You're talking about a guy who threw for 18,000 yards at major college football level, so he can throw the football. I also like Curtis Rourke. I like Curtis Rourke because of the fact of his intangibles. He's very good in the pocket. He's not going to improvise at all, though, so there's some weaknesses there. Kyle McCord and Will Howard, I think, have a chance to be really good if they're in the right system. I think Kyle McCord drives the ball very well from 15 to 25 yards, where I haven't seen it out of Will Howard yet, but I think Will Howard makes great decisions. Will Howard did not show how good a feet he has as he did it when he was at Kansas State. He can really run, and he's really got good feet. So if he's in the right system, he could be really good. I think teams are going to, his pro day and the combine are going to be huge for him because if he shows he can drive the football, I think he'll skyrocket up boards. And once again, at the quarterback position, just like we're talking about, only one guy's got to like you. If one guy likes you, and then you're in. And that's what it takes is you got to impress the right guy with what your skill set is and doesn't match. Bo Nix is a great example with the Denver Broncos.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So you've got the draft combine is coming up next week in Indianapolis, right, Lance?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I got my calendar correctly. Okay, good. You're going to, now, are you good? If I saw correctly, you will be there, correct?
I will not be. No, I will be.
Okay.
The people I work with will be there. No, I'll just be watching the film. I'll be down here watching the film.
You'll be watching the film. All right. But when they're at the combine, and for us fans, what are some of the things that we should take note of? What are some of the drills or measurements that are important or not so important when you're looking at players? I mean, like, when you're talking about a lineman and how fast they're running a 40, is that as important, as watching Tom Brady look sad in his boxer shorts? I mean, which is it? What should we be looking for at the draft combine specifically, anything specific?
Well, I think when you talk about, the speed drills, right? You're going to those 3-cone drills, the 20-yard shuttle, those are drills you want to see. That shows you explosion. When you talk about linemen, you talk about offensive, defensive linemen, you want to see that 10-yard split in that 1.69, 1.7 range. This guys who can get off the ball, they're not running 40 yards. So even whatever their 40 is, it doesn't matter. It's what is their 10-yard split? Obviously, as you get into what I like to do with like receivers and running backs is I watch the combine and then I go back to the tape because you don't want a combine where either there's guys who can run really fast, there's guys who can jump, there's, show explosion, the broad jump, the vertical jump, those things are going to show you explosion and, their ability to get off the ground. The shuttle runs show you change of direction, short area burst. The 40 shows you that raw speed. And then they get into those drills. And I think the drills are much more important, especially for the linemen where they're doing the box drill, just seeing their movement skills, their ability to handle their body, especially those big guys, handle their body in a phone booth. Can they move their body and be good in a phone booth? And then, and then if you see a guy who runs a great time or a DB, how are his hips when you go back and watch the film? Does he get in and out of cuts? All of a sudden you see a guy who he runs a great 40 and has a great combine, and then it go back and it matches. The problem is there's a lot of good football players that don't test very well. And that's the hard thing for the NFL is where do you get a guy who's not, the Tom Brady's, the guys who just have it. And that's a tough one. And so for me, I use the combine. If you see a guy, I would say to people watching, if you see a guy who has great scores or somebody who says he has great scores and has a great combine, go back and watch some film and does it match? Do they play really good in the big games? Do they play good against their best team, the best teams they play? Do they run the ball against the Michigans or the Ohio States, the teams that can stop the run? And that would be my suggestion, is not to really rely on the combine, but rely on the combine to, kind of match what you see on film. Because the bottom line is you got to make plays between the lines, and some guys don't run fast. Some guys, they don't test well, but you blow the whistle and they're really, really good. So that would be my thing. So, the lineman, the 10-yard, I think is important. But, like the bench press, there's not a more, the bench press is showing you, raw. But I think if you ask anybody, that shows you raw strength. But there's not a lot of football. There's not a lot of football on the bench press, right? So, I'd be more, how does he move in those bag drills, the 3 bag drills? I would say more than the tests, watch those drills and the easiest thing to do is, do they look fluid? Even if their times aren't great, how do they look? Do they look like they're struggling? And, we all know an athlete when we see it. So that would be the thing to look for. Just guys who look smooth and fluid. And then you get a guy who looks like that, who's 300 pounds. Then you got a guy who's going to be pretty good in the NFL.
Gotcha.
So do you think that scouts and coaches hold a lot of water to the combine, or is it more anybody can go out and have a bad day, right? You go out in the NFL combine and you just lay an egg, or you're not feeling well or something. So, how much credence do they give this, or is it just kind of a game that they play? Or maybe I've never understood the point of it, to be honest with you, because it seems like it's always the top draft prospects and you have to be invited. So I'm just not sure how much.
Well, you're going to want to see raw speed, because I will say this, there are some measurables you have to be able to play in the NFL, right? So it's just like when I was a high school coach, if you're going to play at Ohio State, and when I was coaching, I had some really good guards who were 5'10", 240 pounds.
Yeah.
Well, no matter how good they are at high school, they're not playing at Ohio State. It's just
right.
the way it goes. You got to have certain measurables, height, right. weight, explosion, speed, just to be able to hang on. That would be, for example, hand size. People always say, why does that matter? We'll play in Northeast Ohio. That's why it matters. Windy, you look at Josh Allen, these guys who throw the ball, it's because they have big hands. And so, you're measuring a quarterback. When people say, why is that important? Wet footballs, bad weather. And that's really what it comes down to. So that's a great arm length if you're a tackle. Why is arm length important? Well, can you get your hands on the defensive linemen, those power edge rushers, before they get to you? Because whoever gets their hands on first wins. So there's some things you need to see, because you want to make sure those measurables match up. But then, like you're saying, that's also got to match the film, because they have to be able to make plays on the field. But those measurables are very important, because there's, regardless of how good you are, you see, it's like a guy like Dylan Gabriel. Why is he not he's 5'10"? And even though he threw for, it's hard. And that was my thing with Bryce Young. It's hard to survive when those guys are so big and strong. It's hard to survive if you don't have a certain weight, a certain mass, a certain ability to see. So,
well, yeah, you have to be able to see over the line.
Some guys take more stock into it. The analytics game is huge now in the NFL. A guy like John Dorsey. John Dorsey likes football players. I was big on Baker coming out, because Baker was the best player in major college football that year. And Dorsey he goes away from that a little bit. That's how I felt. And another guys, Barry, it's more on numbers and stats and what you could be. So there's a fine line with what, potential versus production. And that's a lot, that's at all levels of football. What's that measurement? I would say some are more than others. And some in both ways have been successful, in my opinion, as you look at guys who do it for a living. It just kind of, you gotta, and you gotta get lucky. You gotta get Patrick Mahomes. You gotta get lucky as well. You gotta get guys who, just for some reason are Tom Brady and they don't have the measurables and just have it. And that there's nothing that anybody does with that. That's just luck.
Right. Now, we've seen in the past couple of seasons at the top of the draft that the quarterback class, Heather mentioned the quarterback class. We have seen where the number 1 pick hasn't done as well as the number 2 pick, et cetera, et cetera. So at the top of the draft, you've got Titans, Browns, Giants, Raiders, Jets. that definitely need quarterbacks. If you were to play the quarterback matching game, like you were taking a school test, who would you match the quarterback to? Now, it could be a quarterback that goes in round one. They might get their quarterback later in the draft. But if you could say this is the right quarterback for this team, Titans, who would you put on their team at quarterback?
Well, I would probably go with Cam Ward just because he has the most.
Okay.
He has the highest ceiling, I think, of all the quarterbacks in the draft this year. I also think of the top guys. I also think he has the lowest floor and
Right.
could be trouble because of because how he likes to improvise.
Well, hopefully Bill Callahan will whip him into shape there, because
Correct.
apparently, as what we've heard out of Berea, is that he was the butt kicker at the Browns practices before, last season when he was no longer there. He was the enforcer of such,
Well, I will tell you this. I watch every day. I'm lucky enough to work with Dan Lobby and Mary Kay Cabot.
Oh, wow.
Perfect. And Ashley Bastock. They're wonderful people. And Spencer German, the media people that I've gotten a chance to work with here have been amazing. Dave Campbell. These people are great. And first thing I always do when I go to practice is I go watch the first half hour of practice. So for 2.5 years, I got to watch Callahan for the first half hour every day. He is a tough coach.
Right.
So what you're hearing is absolutely right, because I got to watch it every single day. So you are correct in that.
Right. Okay. So Titans, you would say Cam Ward would be the right fit. All right. For the Browns, you've mentioned possibly Shador. We've talked about Will Howard. Who would you match? Which quarterback would you match up to the Browns?
I would take Shador Sanders at 2, and because of the anticipation, the accuracy. He's been in a circus his whole life with his dad, so the media, the stuff that makes it really, really tough. People have talked about his off-field stuff. That's all. He's just a kid, but he loves football. He's a football junkie. I think he's going to be a really good pro. So I think, and he works great with structure, which is really what Kevin Stefanski needs. So I would say Shador Sanders without question.
All right. What about the Giants? Who would you match up to the G-Men?
I would actually go later, and if I was going to take, you have to have a pretty thick skin to play in New York, right? So I would go later. I would go later rounds, and I would go Will Howard for them. I think they have some other holes they need to fill, but I think Will Howard playing at Ohio State would be able to handle that pressure.
Okay.
I think Will Howard, if you take him late, he's got a pretty good bang for your buck if you get him in the mid round. So I would go just because his ability to handle that pressure playing in New York, and I think he's got a pretty good skill set.
All right. Speaking of dysfunction, how about the Raiders?
That's a good segue.
Well, the Raiders are. I would go Jackson Dart, and the reason I would go Jackson Dart because Jackson Dart kind of fits that, mad bomber of old age for the Raiders. So he's kind of an outlaw. He played for Lane Kiffin. He's very good at throwing the ball deep. Raiders love to throw the ball deep. So I would go Jackson Dart. I think he's a Vegas guy. He's kind of a pretty boy, gunslinger, has a lot of good tools, great in play action. My notes on Jackson Dart is he is as hot and as cold as any of the top quarterbacks in the draft. So I would say he fits that, roll the dice, and I think he would fit perfect in Vegas.
He's got a very Vegas name, Jackson Dart.
Yeah, he does. He's already ready for it.
That's right.
Team of chance there. And the last one that'll go just at top of the draft, the Jets. Who would you match up for the Jets? I mean, they're going to replace the legend, ayahuasca man, Aaron Rodgers.
Aaron, yeah.
It's like, who are they going to screw over? Who's going to be the next Zach Wilson? Or, who would you match up with the Jets?
Well, I'm going to go. I'm going to go Rourke, and here's why. Later rounds again, just because he's a system guy. I think they need a guy. Those teams who are really struggling, the Browns roster is not as bad as those teams, and people say they're far away. I don't think they're as far away because there's some pieces there. So I think I would go late. I would try to fill other things up, but I think Curtis Rourke, because he's a big guy, sturdy. He can be in the pocket, but once again, that would be in later rounds.
Right.
But I like his size. I like his ability to make throws. I like his ability. He's very good at, very smart. And he's a quarterback you can win with. And I say this all the time when I'm meeting with people. There's only very few quarterbacks you win because of. There's a lot of quarterbacks you can win with. And I think a lot of these guys in the draft are guys you can win with. And eventually some of these guys will be guys you win because of.
Right. Okay, appreciate playing the matching game here.
Yeah. Who knew we were going to ask you to play the match?
That's interesting. I like that. It was because it really comes down to, do you get the guy you want? And that's what's, things I'm learning, because I'm just a film guy, right? I'm just a high school football coach. So when I'm learning from
You're
the
not
people,
just a football. Come on. You know what?
the thing I like though is I learn a lot from guys like Tim Bielek, the guy where guys who do the draft and they understand numbers and draft and cap and things like that. So it's really, I think those things are important when you're looking at picks, because will this guy match, and can we afford the guy we have, et cetera. So it's interesting, because it's play the general manager role is really easy to do until you have to do it, right? It's one of those jobs, right?
Right. Until you're actually going. It's so easy to be an armchair quarterback.
I would say I'm
Monday morning quarterback. Yeah,
I'm a coach's kid and I'm a quarterback, and I'm an offensive coordinator. So my skin is pretty thick at this point in my life. So
you at least have more of a right when you're watching, plays unfold. I've never. The only thing I've ever played was flag football. So I don't have any rights.
It's huge in Ohio. It's becoming huge in Ohio right now, by the way.
Oh my gosh, it was so much fun. It was so much fun.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah. So you at least have a right to call these players and where they're going to go, and call the plays on when you're seeing, that was a pass interference. I'm screaming at it and you're like, that was so not textbook pass interference.
Yes, that's right. It's almost frustrating at times. My wife will always say, could you just watch the game without breaking it down? I'm like, I can try.
It's not possible.
It's not possible. No, at this point in my life, it's hard for sure.
It absolutely is. So you talked about, Heather, I'll turn it over to you as we, you finished the matching game. Heather, take it away.
I think we get everything? Did we get everything answered almost? We have a couple more teams that we want to ask about, right? So there's a couple of
there's some outliers like the Seahawks, the
Steelers,
Rams.
Do
you have any feel, because they got to be shopping probably later on,
especially Pittsburgh? I would think especially Pittsburgh right now.
Well, I think I'm really high on Justin Fields. I'm not sure why they're not high. I don't either. And it seems like that with Russell Wilson playing last year. But I think they got a guy there that fits what they want to do, because again, he can run a little bit. Pittsburgh's a team that plays close to the best with Tomlin, so they're not really worried about numbers. They're not worried about having high-powered offense or anything like that. They want to play good defense. They want to play complementary football. They want to end every drive in a kick. And Justin Fields can give that to him, because he can get third downs with his feet. He throws the ball well enough. I'm not sure if you talk about the Seahawks. I'm not sure what they're going to do offensively yet, so I would be tough to make that call. With McVay, a guy like Dylan Gabriel could be really successful in McVay's offense, even though he's undersized, because it's all rhythm, right? So a guy like McVay, a guy like McDaniel, Tua, if you think about a guy like Tua, guys who throw in rhythm, they're not taking a lot of shots because of their size.
Tua is.
But in terms of, his is he's usually when he's running, though, he gets hit, like in terms of their passing schemes, they try to get the ball out in under 2.8. So I think, with the Rams, I think Dylan Gabriel will be a great fit with the Rams. Up in Seattle, maybe you take a shot at Milroe, because, obviously he had a terrible senior role, but I'm also big on a product. There's a body of work that Milroe has had. So maybe there's a coach out there athletically. He's so good. Seems like a great teammate. Maybe there's a guy who thinks highly of him and you get him late in the draft, and maybe he's a fit because of the weather. There's a lot of things that go in it, because he runs really well, and that's become more vogue in the NFL. But I actually think when you talk about, of all the things we said, besides Shador to the Browns, I actually think Dylan Gabriel as a late pick to the Rams would be an absolute steal.
Oh, wow. Yeah, absolutely. And I could see a guy like Milroe in a place like Seattle. There's no pressure right away, because I think they've still got Geno Smith.
They still do have Geno Smith.
They don't have to rush into anything, and they've got a pretty good team. And same with the Rams. I don't know what they're going to do with the contract situation with Stafford and so on and so forth. The Steelers
they need a quarterback, because
they got to figure
they're something. Not going to start Justin Fields, though, and they may get rid of him. You never know. I mean,
hey, man, welcome back, Mason Rudolph. Hey, where's Duck Hodges?
We lost to Duck.
Look, but we're not. But we stink. Okay, we're the Browns, right? We stunk.
We stunk. We stink. Stunk.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. So that's why. You know who you didn't mention? I'm sorry, Quinn Ewers.
Yeah.
Very high up to start the college football season, and he went
right off the cliff like the Roadrunner.
Yeah.
Well, the thing that happens, once again, if my opinion on Quinn Ewers, and I'm not super high on Quinn Ewers. He's just outside my top 10. There's a couple things that happen with Quinn Ewers. First of all, when he gets off of schedule, he
Okay.
does not have elite arm tackle. He does not step into his thing. So if you're going to throw off schedule or off platform is a great term that everybody likes to use. It basically means I'm not throwing correctly. I'm just going to fling it somehow, right? A lot of NFL guys do that, right? He doesn't do that very well.
Okay.
And he doesn't drive the ball very well. And when things get kind of iffy in the pocket around him, he doesn't seem to react very well to it, and he loses his fundamentals. His arm strength has been questioned. He's a guy like Baker where he has to really use his whole body to drive into his throws, and he always doesn't do it. And so that would be some of the reasons I think he slid. Again, another is like Will Howard, though. Sometimes those guys who play on elite teams, it's a really hard evaluation because there's so many good players around him.
Yes.
I think Quinn Ewers has a future in the NFL. He's going to have to show he can drive the football, especially when you get into, December and January in the NFL.
So do you think that that's a hindrance to some of these kids that are in these programs? Like, do you think sometimes that it's like a Will Howard is a really good example. He transferred in, he was known, he had good legs, he had good size, and they didn't utilize him, maybe up to his best talents. I'm not saying that he wasn't great, because in the postseason he was great, but maybe that hurts. Does that hurt a little bit because they're not showcasing the things that they are really good at?
Well, there, going back to why you want to be in the combine or the pro days, there's a great example of why it is productive at times, because you're right. Will Howard did everything, especially in the playoff run. He did everything asked of him, right? And even when they lost to Michigan, it's because they ran at those two got DTs inside.
We forgot what a forward pass was.
Because they wanted to show, how tough they were. And I understand that when you're in a rivalry game. I've done that before. We've all gotten, as coaches, I know I have. I've gotten locked into that. And then you, after the game, you're like, why am I doing that? But a guy like Will Howard's a great example, right? So most of his passes are behind the line of scrimmage or vertical.
Yeah.
And in the NFL, that doesn't work all the time because all the guys can run.
Mm-hmm.
So the combine is going to be great for him because he'll be thrown with the pro ball, and then they'll throw those dig routes, those deep outs, those bang 8 routes on the post routes. There's a lot of things they're going to see in the combine, and he'll be doing it with different receivers. And the cream always kind of rises to the top at the combine, finding that quick connection with receivers who aren't yours. So we'll see what happens, but there's a great example of a guy who could really improve his stock when he goes to the combine, because they're going to make him throw those balls. They're going to make him, and if he does those well, he's done everything else well. So he'll be, and once again, he just needs one guy. He doesn't need 32. He needs one guy to like him.
Yeah.
Right. All right. Well, let's see. We are going to take a brief pause here so that the sponsors can get a word in. And folks, remember, you can pull up the Best Dawg Gone Podcast in the land, all of the Fanatical Elves Networks programs. You can find us on social media. Our tags are below our screens. And Lance, I should have had your Twitter handle up here, and I don't, and we're going to get it in place here in a moment. But you can find all of the podcasts on the Fanatical Elves Network, Fans First Sports Network, on your favorite podcasting platforms. And we are going to take just a brief moment here, and they will insert the commercials. You are tuned in to the Best Dawg Gone Podcast in the land. And welcome back, everybody, to the Best Dawg Gone Podcast in the land. Ethan Greenberg here, along with Heather and our special guest, Lance Riesland. Thank you so much for sticking with us, for tuning in. This is fantastic. Okay, so Heather, where are we at here?
I think we're going to the Browns now. We want to talk about some of the Brown stuff, right? We're going to close this out with some Factory of Sadness.
Yes, absolutely. I think that is the way to do it. Okay. So if the Browns didn't draft a quarterback, and they pick, do they pick at 2 or do they trade down? And if they pick at 2, who do they pick?
Well, if they pick at 2, and for me, it's got to be Carter or Hunter. If they pick at 2, if they decide to go to 2, if they trade down, I would go with Mason Graham, the kid out of Michigan. He's outstanding in everything he does. So those are actually my top 3 breakdowns in the draft, those 3 guys. So if they stay at 2, I would take Hunter. I would take Abdul Carter if they didn't take a quarterback, obviously. And then if they trade down, I would try to get Mason Graham because I think, or possibly Will Campbell or the Calvin Banks kid out of Texas. He's an outstanding tackle with great movement skills. So those would be the guys I would take early. If they trade down, it would tell me that they're probably going to get a bridge quarterback, which I'm not really big on that term. They got to get a quarterback who can win. But it's okay for me if they trade down. It's never wrong for me anyway, to be boring in the draft, and boring is picking big guys on the offense and defensive line because that's where you win. So that's what I would do. That would be my call if they pick 2, go Hunter, go Abdul Carter. They're freakishly athletic. Trade down a little bit, get the 6th, 7th pick, go with Mason Graham out of Michigan.
All right, that's fair enough. I'm going to let Andrew Barry know what you've told me. Okay.
I think that's probably not a bad idea
You might need to hear
at this point.
rather than listen to Deep Podesta. Wait a second? Do you know what Paul Deep Podesta does?
I don't. I have no idea.
All right.
I have no idea.
Shoot. I was going to try and find out the mystery here. My bad.
I probably should. I don't have any idea though.
Nah, it's all good. It is all good. Okay. All right, Heather.
I think Doreen thinks Shador. So it's a good segue into the next question because we talked about trading down. What is the value for the Browns to trade down right now with the desperation that we have, with the big needs that we have? What would be the draw to trade down?
Well, for me, the draw would be to trade down. Is you gotta address some of the positions that are not very good right now or not very deep, right? So if Kevin Stefanski, just kind of take it through. So obviously, I think the quarterback position, they have to be fixed, and we all know that. We've all been talking about that for months now. Then I think if they're going to go back to more 12 and 13 personnel, they're going to have to address their tight end position. Obviously, with Nick Chubb coming back, and it's a great. I could talk all day about the tight ends. It's my favorite, probably one of my favorite positions of the draft. Great tight ends. They're going to have to decide what they're doing at run back because as good as Jerome Ford is, I don't think Jerome Ford's an three down back. And who knows what happens with Nick Chubb? Now everybody says Nick Chubb. There's very few guys that I root for harder than Nick Chubb. For me, getting to watch Nick Chubb every day in practice is absolute pleasure and honor. The guy practices like he's fighting for his job. It's incredible. So there's a guy you just have to root for. So,
Nicholas, root against him. I don't get it.
He's so good. And then, then they gotta figure out what they're doing at left tackle. Jed Wills, doesn't seem like he's the guy. So they're going to have to decide. So if you trade down now, maybe you can get the Banks kid out of Texas, or you can get Will Campbell out of LSU. You continue to trade down. You get some picks maybe in 2nd, 3rd round. If Myles Garrett doesn't want to be here, then you're going to have to find that defensive end. There's a bunch of really good defensive ends. They're not Myles Garrett, so I suggest they try to get him. But the overall underlying thing for me would be filling holes. And you have to fill with just a 53-man roster. You have to be really good. You have to be really good. The depth in the NFL has to be really important. So that would be the value. The value would be, I think I can get a bridge quarterback, wait till next year. Or I think a guy that I think, maybe, I think I'm high on Will Howard. And I think with a year of experience, he'll be the guy, or whatever it is, however they think. Any plan is a good plan unless there's no plan. So just getting more picks. That would be the number one thing. Getting more picks, and maybe you don't value Carter or any of those guys at number 2. That would be a logical reason.
All right. So, I mean, as you mentioned, the Browns have a lot of holes to fill. And they've got salary issues, even though we just found out that allegedly the salary cap is going to go up another $22 million or something around there, approximately. They got some issues with guys.
They've got a contract.
Yeah, we got some issues there. But, they've got all these holes to fill that they need to really fill with younger, cheaper talent. And, is it worth missing out on the top players at the draft board to be able to get more picks and add those other guys that may not be as impactful right away per se?
Well, the good thing for the Browns is that I think their positions of need. I think those positions of need, you can get really good. You can get end of 1st round, 2nd round talent in the 3rd, 4th, 5th round because, for example, a guy like Mason Taylor, tight end from LSU, he's going to be a later round pick. He's super talented. Luke Lachey, the kid, tight end of Iowa. Iowa tight ends are always good. he's going to be a guy who's around. So there's guys who are going to be around. There's only 32 picks. So there are going to be guys who don't get picked that you think will. And there's depth there. There's great depth at offensive tackle. There's great depth on the defensive line. So there's pretty solid depth at safety. So some of the holes they have to fill, if they feel that they have a higher grade on those guys than some, and they're going to get them in later rounds, then no, they can trade down because they feel that they're going to get the value anyway. So, like I said, the one thing I will always say about the Browns, and dysfunction to me is not being run well. And the Browns are run in terms of how practices run and how they do things. It's done very well. And I've been around practice my whole life. It's just not carrying over, and there's just a missing element, whatever that is. And I'm not backing them, but I will tell you as a coach and somebody who's been around the game, they practice well. They're not physical enough for me, but that's my personal opinion. But they're organized. There's a purpose for what they're doing. They just it hasn't carried over this past year. So, yeah, in this draft, it really comes down to who do you value and who are for me, I'm taking Shedeur Sanders too, but that's me because I've watched every tape, and it's paralysis by analysis, right? I'm just stuck on him because I like him, and I think he could be a really good fit for what Stefanski wants to do.
I like that.
So you don't think that, okay, we everybody is really high up on Sanders, and understandably, he's arguably the best quarterback in the draft class. What about his dad? Do you think his dad's going to be a problem? You think his dad's going to be an OBJ kind of dad, or do you think he's going to be I just don't see him not being able to ingest or insert himself into anything and everything.
Well, if you look at what it was Colorado, Pat Shermer will tell you, I think a lot of that, I truly mean this, I think a lot of that is really overrated. If you look at Shedeur Sanders, I read a lot of stuff about him, what he does off the field. What he does off the field, you can't, for me, I try not to, my dad always taught me this because my dad coached for 45 years. You can't say I'm going to do it my way and the kids will do it my way. That's just not how it works anymore. So some of the issues people have with Shedeur Sanders off the field has to do with his playing video games and doing rap videos and doing all this stuff. That's what kids do now.
Yeah, I don't care about any of that.
So
I meant his dad. Like, hey,
yeah. Going to his dad, I really don't. His dad's running a Division I football program. His dad's busy now. Will he interject himself? Sure he will. But there are other parents. But I don't see him being. You're talking about a guy who understands the game. You're talking about a guy who is arguably the best corner to ever play the game. So he'll have some opinions, but that's going to be anywhere he goes. But that to me is a non-factor for me though. But I understand why people think it is a factor. I just don't think in the scheme of his dad being in college. Now, if his dad's not coaching, that would be more of a problem for me. When you're coaching at a Power 4 school, there's not a lot of rest. There's not a lot of days off. So I just don't know. I don't think that's a big deal. I think that's much more. It's not as big a deal as people think it's going to be. And I think that'll play out as he becomes a pro, whoever he's with. I just don't think it'll be. I think Shedeur Sanders is his own man. If you talk to him, very mature kid, seems like he's got his head on his shoulders. I just don't think it'll be a big deal.
Okay.
I was just laughing because I could see the Browns figuring out a way though to get Dion to go off about us in the media because that's just what we do. That's just
and that. The I will say this, the hard thing about covering the Browns, and when I started covering the Browns a couple years ago, they've had some, I had 11-6, working with the people that I work with, it's the hardest thing for a lot of people is when you go down, when you've lost, it's hard to get back on track, and it's hard to get people to believe in what you're doing. And as long as those guys in the building don't feel that way, the Browns got a chance. And it's really hard and I've been a coach who's been really good. And I hate to say it, but I've been a coach who's been really bad. And when you're losing, everything's in question. And when my dad always said winning solves everything, it really does. And what I mean by that is it's just easier. So they gotta start winning. And it sounds kind of simple, but a lot of this they have to figure out a way to win. And it sounds that simple, but that's what the problem is and all these other things come from consistent. They're not dysfunctional. They're just not very good right now. And there's a difference between dysfunction and not being good. And they're not dysfunctional. They're just not very good right now. And that whatever they have to do to fix it, we'll see what happens. But I'm with you. Until you win, it is what it is, right? And you are what your record says you are. It's that simple.
I just felt like the 1-31, 2 seasons that we had, it was at least more respectable. We were at least more of a respectable team. I think we're on our way though. I mean, that's a whole other show too, but I'm not on the get rid of Kevin Stefanski train.
Well, you know what the thing is too, those bad teams, we expect them to be bad. We all had high expectations this year.
We were going to the Super Bowl.
and with expectation comes heartache, right? So and there's a really, and I always say that is like when you're bad, you're bad, and no one cares if you lose because you're bad. And if you think about the end of this year, there wasn't as much turmoil or as much hatred because everybody's like, they're bad. But when they were losing early, it was really hard because they expected such big things this year, and they just didn't get it done. And that's so when there's expectations, and I will tell you this, all those coaches, I never wanted to coach. There's not a coach in the world that doesn't want to coach where there's expectations. If it's okay to lose, you're not a coach. You should. Kevin Stefanski, as much as everybody called for his job, he's as mad as himself as everybody else is because he didn't expect it either. So what everybody's saying, he's saying the same thing to himself. So he's going to do everything he can. All coaches do that, in my opinion. Good coaches.
Right. Good coaches do. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. Man, you said a lot of things. Like you keep saying things, and I'm like, man, that's profound.
I know. I'm like, ooh, I got a lot to study here. Yeah,
absolutely. Okay. We've talked a lot.
I have to tell you, profound's not usually a word that people use.
He's going to get off and tell his wife.
That's right. I'll tell my wife, hey, they said she'll be like, well, we'll have him stick around for a while. So I appreciate that. That, Ken.
Absolutely. No, we've talked a lot about quarterbacks and one thing that strategy. So I'm kind of, moving around here. Is it possible? Could you see the Browns pulling a Washington type of a deal where you take, let's say Ward or Sanders at 2, whomever might be available, and then doubling down in about the 4th round and going after another guy?
Well, they're going to, if they go back to Kevin Stefanski, they're going to have to, right? Jameis doesn't look like he's going to be around.
No quarterbacks. We have an injured Watson,
a quarterback.
So I think no, I don't think that's in going back to what you guys said. So if if you think about, we'll use Will Howard because I think it's a great example of a guy who's really unknown, right? So if you can get your guy, if you get Sanders second, and then you really do your homework and you really like who he is and how he does things, and especially for your scheme, and then he's around you, I don't think that's when your quarterback room is empty and you have a high grade on someone, he's still around later on. Yeah, I don't think if you look at back when they took Martin Emerson, everybody was like, why are they taking Emerson? They got good corners because you need good corners. So you need more than one quarterback. So they're going to have, whether it's a free agent, Kirk Cousins, Sam Darnold, whoever it may be, they're going to have to load up in that room a little bit and get some arms.
We need 4.
Yeah, they need a lot of arms in there. Oof.
I know. It's ironic. In college, they say if you have 2 quarterbacks, you have too many. In the NFL, we're like, how about if you have 0 quarterbacks on a team?
I tell you what, the thing that I say this all the time, I just don't know how these quarterbacks, when you see Myles Garrett coming off the edge.
No, I'm just going to curl into a ball.
Well, yeah, I remember being down there and I was like, I've been in football for 40 years. This won't be that drastic. Then all of a sudden you go down and you see, you go to inter-squad practice and you see the Eagles face the Browns and Lane's going against Myles Garrett, and you're like, how are they not going to kill each other? They're such big guys and they're so athletic, and you can't believe how big and strong and fast they are. So they got to have more than one quarterback because they just don't survive anymore.
Well, that's a good point. That's a really good point. You see so many with the injuries, and Ethan and I were talking about this earlier about some of the, injuries that we see. And I don't know, it's just a different era. As much as they're trying to make it safe, maybe you're seeing less concussions, but you're seeing a whole lot more, structural damages, ACLs, MCLs, PCLs, torn Achilles. You're seeing that now. Now, torn Achilles are freak accidents, right? Like you could just walk and blow it out. Yeah. But, the knee injuries, you're seeing a lot of those.
Definitely. And you talked about the level of competition, the level of physicality for the Browns in training camp and in preseason. Is that a product of a new school way of thinking? Is that a product of the collective bargaining agreement? What is the deal with that? What can they do to fix that? Because what they were doing, I know you're saying that they're working hard in practice, but it didn't work. It didn't show on the field. And I'm just wondering about some of these things and what they might be able to do and why it's happening.
That's a great question. I feel pretty strong about this. So when you go to practice, I don't feel the Browns are physical enough when they're at practice. Now, there's teams that are like that are very successful. But if you're not successful, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result, right? So
Yes.
The Browns haven't been very physical in practice, and I really think it has a lot to do with their injuries and they're getting off the slow starts. And here's why: because they don't go live very often. So now you're a guy who's 300 pounds and you're really fast, and you've gotten all those muscles going, and you haven't maxed out. Then all of a sudden you get in a game and you absolutely go 118 miles per hour. Your body just can't keep up. And if you have not acclimated yourself, it's a combination of everything. But I will tell you, if you watch clips of like the Steelers and some of these old school coaches that still are a little bit more physical, they get off the better starts and they have less injuries. And I think it absolutely has to do with the collective bargaining doesn't let them do 2-a-days anymore. But there's also a level of non-physicality that, like, for example, the Browns have. Now, the Browns were 11-6 the year before and were really good, and I thought it did a great job, and that's how they practice. So I don't think it's necessarily wrong because teams have been successful doing it. I think it's a matter of finding what works for you. And with the Browns, like, for example, I don't know if they can be super physical up front. Those guys are older. But I think Joe Bitonio and Teller and Posick, they'll tell you, it doesn't mean you have to kill each other all day. But I think you can take 15 to 20 minutes, scripted 20 plays and get after it a little bit. And that's kind of when you watch the Browns, if you get off the slow starts, those injuries, is because they haven't gone 100 miles per hour. And then the games they do, and they're just not ready for it. And it's really hard to simulate football at any level.
Mm-hmm.
I remember in high school, you have to hit. It doesn't mean you have to take each other to the ground, but if you can just be physical and acclimate yourself, you seem to get off the better starts, and you seem to get your body ready for that contact of massive human beings running into each other for 3.5 hours.
Yeah, absolutely. As Bill O'Reilly likes to say,
do it live.
Yeah, we'll do it live. Yeah, we'll do it live.
That's right.
You got to get the
sound advice.
Well, you know what? And then there's the other line. Well, why would you hit those guys? There's a lot that goes into it both ways. And I've been on both ends. And my dad was old school. I was a little bit more, I want to say, like, my dad was like, we're hitting all day. And I will tell you that my dad's football teams were always in shape. And he, I was half the coach my dad was. And I'll take it because that's still really good. But he was physical. That was the old school mentality, right? Bill Parcells, hit, and kids, and then you get used to it, and that's how you play. I made sure that we hit every day, but we also didn't have a lot of depth. Now, I think it works at every level. It doesn't matter what level you're at. You have to get young people ready to hit whatever their sport is. So you have to go 100% at some point in practice every day, in my opinion. And the Browns don't. Browns rarely go 100%. Once again, it's organized. There's a purpose. They're doing things right, but they're not killing each other. And you got to.
Am I not shocked to hear this?
It's just don't.
Stories.
Just don't hit.
Well, you see stories though of players getting into like fist fights because they're hitting each other so hard, and it's like, okay, the way men fight, they fight, they argue, and then they're fine. That's let them duke it out, man. If I would rather have them fight and get a little bit angry.
Well, the reason you fight in camp, and I remember this all the time because I remember when I long time ago when I was playing college football is when you go against the same DBs every day, right? So you know what the coverage is, what they're doing, and as a quarterback, I would cheat, and I would say I know what Brandon's doing because this is what they're doing. I wouldn't know that if I didn't practice against Brandon every single day, and he would do the same thing to me.
Yeah.
So by the end of practice, you would kind of get chippy with each other, right? Now, if
you've had enough of each other.
If it's an offense or defensive lineman, you hit each other all the time. So Myles Garrett knows everything that Conklin's going to do. He knows all his tricks. Conklin also knows everything that Myles does. And they should, at a certain point in time, they should be a little testy because they should cheat because they both know what they're doing. And it's the seventh day of camp. And that's where those fights come. Those fight comes with, you're testy because the guy's blocking you because he's cheating because he knows you win against him every day. And that's where that testiness comes in because you know what the other guy's doing. And I remember at camp, I would scream and yell, and it's pretty common, but you don't see a lot of nastiness at Browns camp. You see a lot of organization, but you don't see a lot of people being irritated. And I think there's a place for it. Now, that's just my opinion. But
I agree. There's definitely a place for it.
There's place for being irritated. If you watch the Steelers play, if you watch the Ravens play, they play irritated. They play angry. And there's a reason for that. That's the way they practice.
I play angry at work. So it's only,
Absolutely right.
We should practice being angry.
Absolutely right. Practice what you preach. Absolutely.
Yes, exactly. Well, Ethan, did you have anything else? I know we're a little over the hour mark.
We are a little bit over the mark, but Lance, you've been so good and you provided us with such great information. Well, first of all, I just want to say before, we got one final question, and I think you may have hit this, but we'll ask it again just for the audience's sake here. But first of all, you are always welcome on this show. We would love to have you back on as we move forward, because this is so great. It's informational for us. It's an excellent conversation to have and for people to hear it out there. And also, thank you for all the work that you do.
Mm-hmm.
I know that writing and the beat reporters get beat up. I think that's what the beat part of beat reporters is. It's beat up. I feel, having gone through the School of Journalism at Kent State and having met guys like Grossi, they get beat up. Ryder, Mary Kay, Grossi,
hard workers. They're such hard workers too. They are impressive people when they work. Mary Kay and Dan Ashley, these people I work with, are such. Spencer and Dan, you name it. All these guys, Jonathan Peterley, these guys all work so hard at their craft, just like you guys. So I appreciate you guys having me on. It's a pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you. All right. So the last question, and just to reiterate here, at the end of the day, what do you think the Titans should do at 1, and then what should the Browns do at 2?
Well, if you ask me, I think the Titans should take the best player in the draft, and I think the best player in the draft is Travis Hunter. And I think the Browns should take Shedeur Sanders because I think he's the best quarterback. And I don't think he's the highest ceiling, but I think it's close enough that he gets in the right system. So I would say they take you go Hunter or Abdul Carter because he's in that freakish nature too. That wouldn't be crazy to me either. Then you take Sanders. And then you start to address your depth at tight end in the next round. And then you address your depth at running back. And then you address your depth at offensive, defensive line, and you work that way. That would be my call.
All right. Fantastic.
You heard it here first.
You did hear it first. All right. So once again, everybody, you can follow Lance at Lance Riesland. And he contributes there's his Twitter handle, his X handle, and he is all over the place. He is a great follow just for football knowledge, for Browns knowledge, everything like that. And you can follow us, the best Dawg Gone podcast in the land. We are a part of the Fanatical Elves Network, a subsidiary of Fans First Sports Network. You can follow Heather at Love Buckeyes, at all of her things are at, and our Twitter handle is at TBDGPITL, best Dawg Gone podcast in the land. Follow me.
We've made it. We have a Tibiddle.
Exactly.
I like it.
There it is. And you can follow me at egreen4325. So once again, thank you everybody for tuning in. Be sure to check out the podcast on YouTube, on Twitter, on all of your favorite platforms, like, subscribe, et cetera, et cetera. Lance, we cannot wait to have you back on again. And that is going to do it here from the best Dawg Gone podcast in the land. We'll see you guys again next time. Thank you.